Hi, yeah, thanks for having me here this evening. It's a good opportunity to put all my thoughts together well, mine and other people's thoughts, I should emphasise. I did see Mike Outhwaite here earlier. I don't know where he's just sitting at the moment, but there he is, yes. No heckling, please. So Mike completed his thesis, his master's thesis on the Caravel copper project in 2017, that it was, maybe? Yeah, anyway, so we have moved on a bit since that point in time, but Mike's thesis stands as a very valuable document regarding the project, and we have had Mike's involvement in some aspects of the core and the interpretation and the modelling and things of the deposit since that time. So yes, the Caravel Copper Project, CCP. The Caravel Copper Project seems a bit of a mouthful, so you'll see CCP through the talk a few times. It's not the Chinese Communist Party, it is the Caravel Copper Project. And then just an Archaean porphyry system, and with a question mark, is it a porphyry? We think it is. There might be some out there who are questioning that. I'm happy to discuss, but we think there is enough evidence to suggest that perhaps it is, or it has some parallels with. Right. So moving on, just a quick overview, and I will reference this a bit during the talk as far as the landscape that we're in. The stage of the project at the moment, we are currently underway through a definitive feasibility study. We want to start a mine here. This is our main resource that sits under this paddock. Looks pretty benign, cleared, cultivated, fairly flat. It's got a lot of ticks in boxes, so I just want you to, going through the talk, I want you to take that with you, as there's lots of positives as far as this project. The big negative is the grade. All right, so in summary, I'll stand here so I can read. Yeah, so discovered in 2009. We're about 130 kilometres northeast of Perth. It's within the you and me terrain, adjacent to the boundary with the southwest terrain. It's a queer beast, as far as a strange beast, as far as the age, if it's a porphyry system, that it's 3,000 million years old. It's been subject to upper amphibolite facies metamorphism and also some tight overturn folding, and the host, it basically is a gneissic high strain zone. So, as I say, we think it's a porphyry, but bear with me. So there is some evidence to suggest it's a porphyry style system of Archaean age. Our 2023 resource, modelled by Laurie Barnes, I'll just point somebody else out here, so there he is. So we've got at a 0.1% copper cutoff, we've got 1.2 billion tonnes of ore at running 0.24% copper. This is the low grade part. So, but there's a lot of it, and that turns out to 3 million tonnes of copper in the ground. 2022 pre-feasibility study, the Caravel Copper Project would support processing 27 million tonnes per annum for 28 years, producing about 60,000 tonnes of copper per annum in concentrate. So it's a big animal, big beast, and being in copper, it's a good time to be looking at copper at the moment. And so just a couple of photos on the left, a handful of RC chips. Hopefully you can see some of the chalcopyrite in that. Gets a bit exciting when you can sieve your chips and see the chalcopyrite floating up on the surface there. Nice atmospheric photo of a drill rig. And then looking at some core, it's a lovely drilling country for diamond core that the core holds together, and we can get some really good structural data from this core that the orientation lines, they go and they go and they go and they go when the drillers do them right in the first place. But we've got some nice stringer chalcopyrite here, and one of the things to point out is that there's some the stringer chalcopyrite is generally parallel to the foliation. So I'll dwell on that a bit later on. Discovery history. So back in the late 1800s, there was some of the early surveyors and things, there was copper and gold noted on the western side of the Wongan Hills. So I'll refer to Wongan Hills and the Wongan Hills. And so there is a town by the name of Wongan Hills. The Wongan Hills is a geographical feature just nearby. and it's the southern end of a greenstone belt. And so the early surveyors, they certainly noted copper in that part of the world, and that basically forms the northernmost tip of our project area. In the 1870s to 1890s, Otter and various joint venture partners were exploring the Ninan prospect. So Ninan sits at the southern end of that Wongan Hills greenstone belt, and they were looking for gold. And there is certainly some gold there, not enough to be of economic interest at this stage. SEPA did some work there in the 90s and some good mapping, but again focused on Ninan. Geodex, our current joint venture partner, picked up the ground in 2001. Geodex is a one-man, Jeff Doust. I don't know if anyone knows the name, but that's Jeff Doust. Where was I going with that? Yeah, so he's picked up the Ninan prospect and put together some data on that, and then brought Dominion in as a joint venture partner. Now, Dominion, if you trace it back, is the precursor company of Caravel. So Dominion, my time with the organisation doesn't go back that far, but obviously Dominion has a long history in the West and South Australia, and long and successful history. So Dominion. So yeah, Dominion, we're exploring again for gold around Ninan, but Dominion also had a program of regional roadside sampling right across the southwest of WA. And they had teams fanning out roadside sampling every 500 metres along most of the major roads through the southwest of WA. And particularly, they were sampling along the roadsides south of Ninan. I say that, but it was a lot more widespread than that, but they sampled along these roads south of Ninan, and they found some copper on the three, I think it is, let's say three shire roads south of Ninan, and so they basically formed an anomaly about 25 kilometres long with elevated copper in surface sampling. So that got them interested. They've come back in 2009, 2010, auger sampling to follow up, auger-derived soils to follow up that, air core, detailed air mag, and we put the first, Dominion put the first RC hole into the Opie prospect, which is right at the southern tip, so 25 kilometres away from Ninan, and the first RC holes, and one of those returned 74 metres at 0.4% copper. So a good result. Dominion became Kingsgate, and I might be a bit vague on exactly how that happened, but Dominion became Kingsgate, and they did further follow-up. So that's 2011 to 2013, further follow-up air core, RC, diamond drilling with some EIS funding, and IP at Bindi, Dasher and Opie, and these are the names of the prospects that you'll hear me talking about. Bindi is our main prospect, Dasher is the secondary one, Opie, where that initial drilling intersection was, sits a poor cousin right down the southern end. Yeah, but we'll get to that. So then Kingsgate spun out and Caravel was born. Further follow-up RC, limited diamond, again with EIS funding. And this is where Mike comes in. Mike's thesis was a mapping, correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, but mapping and also looking at those handful of diamond holes. Particularly, the diamond holes were drilled at Dasher. There was only one hole drilled at Bindi in those early days. No diamond at Opie, and no structural data to speak of at Opie itself. So Caravel, First Quantum, there was a joint venture there, 2015, 2017, a major resource drilling at Bindi primarily, and the first maiden resource for the project, an initial scoping study. And then Caravel has gone it alone basically since then with 2018, 2019. One of the key things here, 2018, new management, new energy. We put some diamond holes into Bindi, and the light bulb moment as far as the structural understanding of what's going on at Bindi. As far as prior to that point, Bindi was a broad anti-formal structure, only defined by RC drilling, so no structure really possible, and no outcrop to speak of. If you think back to the aerial photograph there, there's not much outcrop. The first couple of diamond holes, and it was, as I say, a light bulb moment. We're not dealing with a broad antiform, we're dealing with an overturned antiform, and everything started to make sense, and put a few RC holes in to test that, and time after time, they all worked as we expected them to. So the value of a diamond hole and some structural data, I can't be understated. Yeah, so then 2020 to 2022, we've had some major infill RC programs, again at Bindi. Bindi represents about 60% of our resource, Dasher probably 30%. So I'll refer to Bindi a lot. Plus further diamond drilling, but most of that was metallurgical work, geotech work, and the like. Pre-feasibility study, maiden ore reserve, and 2023 to the present, we're working on the feasibility study, which, as probably all of you know, is environmental review documents and permitting, and where's the water coming from, where's the power coming from, and things like that. Cool. All right, so, sorry, a bit of history there, just in case there were people in the audience who had some connection with those entities. Caravel Copper Project, location. So we're 130 kilometres northeast of Perth. It's proximity to the regional centre of Wongan Hills. I think Wongan Hills has a population of around 2,000 people. There's a high school, there's a hospital, there's an IGA, there's 2 service stations, there's 3 major farm machinery. Say that again? And a great pub, yes, very with the Art Deco exterior. Looks a bit sad inside. Does good chicken palmy. The project is spread across 3 shires from Wongan Balladu, the Victoria Plains, and Goomalling. So we're in dealings with all of those shires. Good surface roads to the project area, literally past the southern end of the Bindi prospect. We have a 2-lane bitumen road in very good nick. Highway connections to existing port facilities. So the previous scoping studies, feasibility studies have looked at shipping concentrate out through Bunbury or Geraldton. Currently, I think Bunbury has the edge, but that's not a done deal. But they're existing port facilities, and we can just be sending trucks down the road. It's in cleared, cultivated land. So again, looking over Bindi, this is looking north. The previous one is looking south, just so you know I'm not telling you lies. The white patch up in the corner there, that's Lake Ninnan, if people are familiar with that part of the world. Highway connections include, yes, so, and covered by the southwest native title settlement area. So we're in freehold land. This is all large scope farms. It's, lots of positives. I'll focus on the positives. All right, so some geology. So the CCP regional setting, located within the You and Me terrain, within about 20 kilometres of the northeast dipping terrain boundary. So that's marked by the Yandanuka Cape Riche lineament, the YCRL, as shown on the map there. The YCRL has been a significant tectonic boundary circa 3,200 billion years, and marks the boundary of the parallel high temperature, low pressure granulite facies metamorphism, namely the Gympeding metamorphic belt, which has been accreted, we believe, this is part of our porphyry theory, but we believe that it's been accreted onto that terrain margin. The YCRL, as a point of interest, is also coincident with much of the southwest seismic zone. So it's a major structure. It's still some activity on it today. High strain, ductile deformation and upper amphibolite facies, peak metamorphism of our deposit, but also surrounding the Wongan Hills greenstone belt and things, is consistent with burial depths up to 10 kilometres. And this is one of the key things. We think it's a porphyry. How does a porphyry that old get preserved? We think it was buried and therefore wasn't eroded during that time. And then the Wongan Hills greenstone belts, 3,010 million years, immediately to the north of the CCP, is comprised of intermediate volcanics, metasediments, and included some banded iron formation. So just to talk about the diagrams here, I'll finish this. So what we're looking at here is a Bouguer gravity overlaid over the air mag, and just the fact that the gravity fairly well picks out the boundary of that terrain boundary, and obviously the Perth Basin, Darling Fault sort of shaky hand. Some of the rocks I couldn't do a talk and not put lots of pictures of rocks. I think we've got some pretty nice looking rocks. So yeah, just looking at some of the better mineralization, there's some good chalcopyrite and pyrrhotite associated with that. Pyrrhotites, we certainly do see some, but it's not ubiquitous throughout the whole deposit. I would say too, there's some core here. If people want to pass that around during the talk or come and have a look afterwards, feel free. I've counted them. There's 4. I'd like to see 4 pieces at the end. So. Bit of a killjoy. Did I? No, hang on. Oh no, sorry. There we are. Interpreted position in a volcanic arc around 3,000 million years at a convergent margin where the southwest terrain was subducted below the Yuanmi terrain to the east, with partial subduction under thrusting burying the Porphyry system and the Wongan Hills Greenstone Belt and thus preserving them from erosion. And then just as a point as far as ultramafic and serpentinite pods with BIFs and metasediments in the Bolgart area, Bolgart to Northam area, we would suggest that they have some similarities to ophiolites seen in other collisional terrains. So just to make that point, so yeah, the green, hang on, where am I? There. The green, this again, we're looking at a mag image here. The green is marking out some of these ultramafics. We suggest that there would be an ophiolite complex. The Wongan batholith, so that's what's hosting our mineralisation, sits up here. And then just looking at a quick cartoon. Hang on, I've lost my mouse. Where is he? There. So just looking at a section through there, A, B, and then just trying to sketch in roughly what we think might be happening there as far as that. So the Yerracoin BIFs, so there's a iron project out at Yerracoin, so there's certainly BIFs out there. On that section, the ophiolite would be at depth and then coming out to the Perth Basin. Local geology. So we're hosted in 3,010 million year Wongan batholith, our name, not an official name, contemporaneous with the Wongan Greenstone Belts, and is intruded by younger granites circa 2,650 million years. Mineralised high strain zone of the Ninan, Bindi, Dasha, Opie extends for about 30 kilometres, just inside the western margin of that Wongan batholith. So you see Ninan up here in the north, Bindi, obviously there's some folding, and I'll talk about that in a bit more detail later on. Dasha to the south, Opie to the right at the very southern tip. So remember, this is where the original hole was, the 2009 discovery, whereas Ninan was where the historical mineralisation was. Those aerial photographs from the drone there, that's Bindi there. So we've got, that's 30 kilometres. We have some, and I'll talk about this a bit more in detail, but just while we're looking at this image, through this area here is an area by the name of Caravel. So there's some significant mineralisation there. We've got strong IP geophysical signature there with the chargeability. There's some good drilling numbers. There's good surface numbers. There's something more happening there, but the focus has been, it's a big project. We're a small company. The focus has been drawn into the main game at Bindi at the moment. And then some of the other gaps here coincide with major paleo drainage features. I say major. The northernmost one between Ninan and Bindi is definitely a major one. It's the modern North Mortlock River. As you come further south, they get less and less significant, but still they're quite notable, and it's not easy to drill underneath those. Where did I get to with that? Strong folio. Oh yeah, okay. So mineralised high strain zone, Bindi, Dasha, Opie, 30 kilometres long. Yes, just inside the margin. Strong foliation in the high strain zone displays stretching lineations, parasitic folding that reflect the interpreted large-scale folds. So I guess what the point I'm trying to make there, and I'll come back to it a bit later, the folding we see at small scale reflects very closely the folding we see at large scale. So it's a nice, neat sort of picture there. Upper amphibolite facies metamorphism, circa around 2650 to 2670 million years, is coincident with regional deformation and the gold mineralisation across the wider Yilgarn. So this predates the wider Yilgarn gold mineralisation a bit, but it has been cooked up by that same event. The timing of peak metamorphism is consistent with overthrusting, resulting in the deep burial of that Wongan batholith. So I'm talking local geology, and forgive me here, hang on, sorry, I will just dwell on, just looking at some core on the left there. This is from, what is it, a dasher hole. This is pretty typical for some of the mineralisation, both dasher and at Bindi. We've got a banded gneiss. I will talk about this in a bit more, but it's a good picture. It shows some nice stringer mineralisation and good solid core that we can piece together and get all the structural data that we value. Right, that's the same piece of core but cut. So again with some nice, really nice chalcopyrite. If you follow Caravel closely, you might have seen that image in various reports and things. The map, on the other hand, so this exactly the same area, but we're looking at the regolith, and I do talk about the regolith, but I wanted to put this map in mainly to talk about the paleo drainage features. So this blue here and that big blue blob there, that's Lake Ninnon, underlain by a whole lot of lacustrine clays, which we see in some of the drilling just at the northern tip of Bindi here. And then there's a second, this pink is another paleo drainage, largely sand with a little bit of colluvium, and then another modern, smaller drainage system down here. But the three of them, bloody things, cut up the system a bit. But we think there's continuous mineralisation throughout that 30 kilometres. Host rocks, coarse-grained granite gneiss after a Monza granite and cyanogranite. Mineralised gneiss is composed of quartz, microcline, oligoclase, biotite, plus or minus garnet, so that's an almandine, very fine-grained. If you look at some of the core and some of the photos, you'll see they're quite fine-grained, probably up to 2 mil or something, I suppose. Magnetite and a little bit of sillimanite. Retrograde metamorphism, particularly along the late structures, has produced a chlorite and epidote assemblage, but that's fairly secondary. It's not generally associated with mineralisation, maybe some late stage remobilisation things. The dasher mineralised system occurs in a north-south window between younger east-dipping weakly foliated granites, but the gneissic foliation within that dash, the general sort of trend of the gneissic foliation within that is to the northeast, is dipping to the northeast. So you can't see it here. I'm going to talk mostly about Bindi, but I just wanted to mention dasher. As far as these younger granites, so we're only seeing a window of dasher, and we haven't really explored out along that northwest southeast trend of that foliation yet. Ninnon, so right up in the north, is generally within the southern end of the Wongan Hills Greenstone Belt. Its host rocks are different from the others, from the Bindi Dasher Opie trend. We've got intermediate volcanics and biffs. There's negligible molybdenum. We have molybdenum in all of the others. Dasher hardly any. Dasher, on the other hand, has some reasonably significant gold. That's why people have been exploring there in the past. But it's probably overprinted from a younger event. Limited outcrop across the surface area. There's no outcropping mineralisation aside from some at Ninnon. We don't have any marker horizons identified to date within the mineralised high strain zone, but there are some compositional trends that are evident in the lithogeochemical data at Bindi. And we see it at Bindi primarily because we've got a greater density of drilling in that area, and it's possible to start to see some of these lithogeochemical changes. Continuous mineralisation between Ninnon and Opie, disrupted mostly just by those deeper paleo drainage systems. So just to talk about the regolith a bit, so think back to the regolith map, but I wanted to show some pictures here. Variable regolith profile across the CCP, from 80 metres of laterite, saprolite, saprock at Ninnon to down to 15 metres at Dasher. And sometimes at Dasher, if you put the sump in the right place, you'll find some oxide mineralisation in the bottom of the sump, but it doesn't actually outcrop as such. The Bindi regolith, so I'll talk mostly about the Bindi regolith, is 30 to 40 metres thick with laterite in the and sorry, both these holes in the bottom here are Bindi. So we've got a laterite profile at the top in the elevated areas, going through a bleached saprolite zone, moving into a more ferruginous saprolite, and then a fairly rapid transition into the fresh rocks. So yeah, that's hopefully fairly self-evident there as far as laterite, bleached saprolite, ferruginous saprolite coming fresh, and then yeah, fresh rocks from 30-40 metres. This one's a little bit of a curiosity that we've actually got some fairly coarse cobbles below the laterite, suggesting obviously that the laterite's not in situ, and then off into some bleached saprolite. Ninin, on the other hand, the handful of native copper there has come out of an RC hole that we drilled there in 2020. I got a bit excited when your sieve feels really heavy with all this native copper. It's a bit of a, what's this? So Ninin has quite a strong supergene mineralisation, as opposed to the others. There's supergene at Bindi is restricted to areas on the periphery, downslope from those laterite highs, and fairly minor at that. There's little bits and pieces elsewhere in the project area, Dasher East and Opie, but none of that has been included in the resource. Just as far as the disposition of the copper through the regolith profile, we do have some anomalous copper in the laterite zones, and that's almost certainly what was picked up in the original soils. We come down through the bleached clays and there's nothing, it's dead. And then you come down into the fresh rocks and there it is. It's, as I say, fairly rapid transition to those. Yeah, then just again talking about the paleo drainage channels, incised up to about 70 metres deep. So that's the northern one, that North Mortlock channel is incised through about 70 metres of the regolith profile. Why did that one change and that one didn't? Okay, okay. All right, so the CCP mineralisation. Mineralisation at the Bindi, Dasher and Opie. So keep in mind Ninin's a bit different, so I'm going to be talking about Bindi, Dasher and Opie. So it consists of foliation parallel sulphide stringers with occasional coarse remobilised sulphides. Our sulphide assemblage is overwhelmingly chalcopyrite with significantly lesser pyrite, plus or minus pyrrhotite, plus or minus molybdenite, but the chalcopyrite is the dominant sulphide in our system. We have comparatively uniform grades within a broad mineralised zones with comparatively few assays exceeding 1%. Relative enrichment of copper mineralisation in the hinge zone. So there has been some movement of the copper during metamorphism and deformation into the hinge zone. So those hinge zones represent slightly, and I say slightly, when I say they're not tens of percent or something like that, but they are slightly more enriched in copper and some of the other minerals as well, silver being one. Molybdenite is usually associated with the chalcopyrite, so that it'll go with the chalcopyrite, but not all of the copper is associated with molybdenite. We see some quite coarse molybdenite at times, but it's not uniformly spread through. So seems to be some sort of zonation of the molybdenum, and we feel that's probably a primary feature. Gold and silver mineralisation follows the copper. There is some non-uniform distribution of it, such that some of the silver is remobilised into the hinge zones. Mineralisation is associated with the D1 high strain zones at all scales, and I've got some photos later on talking about that. But so this D1 high strain zone, that's what's hosting our mineralisation. The rocks in between, so you're seeing the image there of the Bindi antiform. The rocks in the middle are much the same, aside from a few younger granites and dolerites and things, effectively the same, but they're not deformed, they're not that high strain zone, and they're not mineralised to any degree. Right. The general form of the mineralisation, sorry, there's a lot of information here, so I'll try and bear with me here, please. The general form of the mineralisation is grossly parallel to the S1 foliation of the in that location. So I mentioned previously, we don't have any marker horizons. We're mapping this system out based on the assays, but also based on our structural data that we get from our diamond drilling. and very much so the shape that we define with that foliation, the folds that we're defining with that maps out our mineral, the high strain zone, and therefore the mineralisation. Alteration associated with mineralisation is not preserved. It's likely that the garnet and sillimanite assemblage that we see are the metamorphosed products of the original alteration assemblage. So this is where it starts, people might start to ask questions. Obviously, the classic porphyry system has got some really nice alteration zonation, and it's got some good vein textures, morphologies. We don't have that. It's been cooked up, twisted around, and so that's where one of the big question marks come on it. It doesn't have that box ticked as far as being a porphyry system. But there is something going on with the garnet and the sillimanite, and some of Mike's work, and we can see it in some of the later sampling and things as well, is that there is a general depletion in the calcium and sodium across the system, which has led to a general enrichment in the aluminium, iron and magnesium in the mineralised zones. And that's attributed to the primary alteration. So you take a porphyry system and you cook it up, the alteration minerals are going to be metamorphosed to something else, and that's what we think has happened. So the relative enrichment in the aluminium has produced an aluminosilicate minerals, hence the garnet and sillimanite during later metamorphism. And just to look at some photos, again, some nice, sexy, these are some of the higher grades. The lower grades aren't that exciting, but I've got a few of those later on. And then a few images from one of, I think they're from the resource estimate actually, just showing some of the distribution. This is Bindi, talking about the copper, the moly, the gold and the silver. And it is possible to see some of this zonation, particularly this moly on the east limb here, that there's a real comparatively rich moly zone, whereas the copper is enriched in the hinge zone, looks pretty good in the east limb. Gold, good in the hinge zone. Silver, significantly enriched in the hinge zone. So there is some mobility of some of the metals during metamorphism into those hinge zones. Oh yes, so this is, the text hasn't changed. I just wanted to, again, this is one I pulled out today, thinking I just wanted to make the point that we've got really consistent grade through the ore zones, that we're not dependent on a couple of spikes for nuggety sort of copper. Obviously there are some there, but that broad range between 0.1, which is our general sort of cutoff for our resource, and 0.3, there's a whole lot of numbers in there. And this is actually two holes twinned about 7 meters apart, and there's a pretty good correlation there between them. So it's good, consistent deposit that will lend itself hopefully to bulk mining. Structural model. Shut your ears, Mike. So we've got two major structural events, D1 development of a penetrative foliation and tight folding, and then D2, we've got a east-west compression producing open folding and a weak axial planar foliation. The mineralised high strain zone sits just inside the edge of the Wongan batholith. I haven't got, well, yes, you can see it here actually, sorry. So I did zoom in here, so that's Bindi. I just wanted to illustrate, keep that in mind as far as an antiform in the middle there. But our mineralisation hugs very much just inside the margin of that Wongan batholith. D1 tight folding of the high strain zone has produced regional scale folding, with Bindi and Dasher occurring in parasitic folds. The tight Bindi fold is D1 overturned to the east with a vergence sense that suggests that it's on the western side of an antiform, with folds hinges plunging to the north-northwest. Dasher, on the other hand, we don't see the broad folds that we're seeing at Bindi, but we do see some nice parasitic folding there. Also D1 indicates that it's sitting on the eastern side of a regional antiform with parasitic fold hinges plunging to the north-northeast, hence sketching in some sort of more regional, larger scale antiform in between the two. Opie, There's no structural data available down there. There's no diamond drilling. There's no outcrop. Piecing a story together based on the RC drilling and air core drilling and things that we have. A little bit on the air mag too. It seems to be a D1 synform plunging off to the northeast with a similar vergence sense to that seen at Bindi. So there's almost certainly another a synformal sort of structure in between Dasher and Opie. So it becomes a slightly more complicated picture. Ninan, again, tight D1 antiform overturned to the east, very similar to Bindi. And that's obviously sitting to the north. So yeah, D1 folding at all scales mirrors the prospect scale folding. So the text remains the same, just wanted to show some photos. The one in the bottom left here, just showing some of the stringer sulfides parallel to the foliation, just as a for instance. The top right there, that's a little outcrop at Ninan back in the 80s, I suspect. They put a costine across the top of the hill, and there's a very handy little fold there. But we see that fold, that sort of shape of folding at a larger scale elsewhere. And then a section through Bindi, where are we? There we are. West limb, east limb, coming down into this southeast synform, and I'll talk about that a little bit more later, but obviously there's not a lot of drill holes on that section into that. On other sections, we do see really good structural evidence to support some sort of synformal fold closure there. We are seeing something up dip, and again, I'll talk about it a bit later on, but there is good surface geochemistry to suggest there's something coming to surface there. Does it look exactly like that? Probably not, but there's something happening. There's some sort of repetition of the folding, and this is one of our future exploration targets is to work on that. And then potentially another system out here. Again, there's some surface geochemistry on that. Deposit history. So 3010 million years, intrusion of monzogranite, cyanogranite into existing Wongan greenstone belts, then the onset of D1 deformation. 2997 to 2957, we've got the mineralization starting with the molybdenum dominant veining, D1 deformation starting. Towards the end of that period, we've got the copper dominant veining, and then by the end of that, we've finished our D1 deformation. 2673 to 2670, intrusion of the post-mineralization granitoids. 2670 to 2650, east-west compression, overthrust, burial, upper amphibolite facies metamorphism, D2 deformation. 2650 million years, intrusion of post-tectonic granites, brittle faulting, and the retrograde metamorphism, and then a long quiet spell between that. And then later on, as far as uplift and weathering and incision of the paleo drainage features and things. And the little cartoon here is from Mike's thesis. I do acknowledge that at the bottom. And then some nice molybdenum from one of the recent dash holes, not so recent dash holes, but and there's also some good garnets there on the side. I like pretty pictures. But is it a porphyry? So the evidence, the copper, moly, plus or minus gold and silver, metal association, the tenor of the grades and the size of the system is certainly consistent with modern porphyry systems seen elsewhere in the world. There's a suggestion of some primary copper and moly zonation. Plagioclase destruction and the K feldspar magnetite formation, so that's the loss of the sodium and calcium from the system and the formation of the, as I say, potassium feldspars. It is a monzogranite host rock, not to say that that's the source of the fluids, but it's not a definitive, yes it is, no it isn't. Setting in an overriding plate at a convergent terrain boundary, reverse thrusting over the top, which is buried the system and allowed its preservation. And just to point out that the Boddington, it's a gold, copper, moly deposit. It's a bit younger than ours, but it does have some indications of porphyry style mineralisation there, different host. Complications, so the amphibolite facies metamorphism during burial has cooked everything up. Alteration, zonation and veining morphology are lost because of that metamorphism. Negligible geophysical signature. So the classic porphyry will have a really good air mag signature and that sort of business. We don't. Our geophysics, sorry for any geophysicists in the room, we have used air mag for the regional mapping. We have used IP at times. It has been useful sometimes. Sometimes it gives us a lot of false positives too. And that's about it. We've tried EM, we've tried a few other things. Remke, I see here, we've used passive seismic to some effect, mapping out some of the paleo drainage features, both here and also elsewhere where we're looking for water. But yeah, it doesn't have a very strong geophysical image, signature. And then the tabular shape of our mineralised high strain zone, it's not consistent with a 3D, you know, the classic porphyry system of a carrot sort of shaped system. So I guess the question I'd ask is, are Archaean porphyry systems not preserved due to their formation at shallow depth and erosion, or are they not recognised as such because they've been cooked up and deformed over the years? Future growth, just a couple of last slides just to finish up. Future growth, so looking at potential depth extensions. Now, the current optimised pit at Bindi goes down 450 metres. Possibly we're not looking at open pit resources, but some of those hinge zones could make good targets for block caving or something along those lines. And certainly the hinge zone of Bindi would be a prime target. Folded repetition of the Bindi high strain zone. So again, just coming back to this, quite a bleak angle here, there we are. So west limb, east limb, this lower limb. So again, this is one of these diamond holes where we're seeing some good evidence to support this synformal sort of closure down there. We don't have the shallower drilling here, but we do have over here, this is some of this air core drilling out along trend, and there's some good numbers that stretch out there, which it sits in exactly the right spot to be an up dip extension of that lower limb. Now, maybe the system doesn't daylight, maybe it's a bit deeper. One of the attractions with that that's our current optimised pit down 450 metres. The fact that if this lower limb is real in some way, shape or form, it sits immediately below the current optimised pit. So it's not some great strip back and things to get at it. And then this, what is it, Bindi Far East, I call it. I don't know, lack of imagination, but there is some geochemistry out there, and there is some there is some primary mineralisation to it. Bindi and Dasher basically represent, so Bindi and Dasher represent 98% of our mineralisation, but they also only represent 6 kilometres of the overall 30-kilometre long belt. Now there's paleo drainage features in there, there's going to be some folding and complications and things, but potentially we're only scratching the tip of the iceberg at this stage. And one of the more obvious parts of the iceberg, so looking at this plan here, so Ninan in the north, Bindi here, this is the extent of our drilling. Dasher, you see a big gap here, that's paleo drainage, that's paleo drainage, that's paleo drainage. Opie is down here. This is Caravel. So Caravel, there is some strong IP chargeability features which are coincident with some wide-spaced RC drilling intersections, significant drilling intersections. There's a major surface geochemistry. There's a lot going on there. Almost certainly they represent fold hinges. Maybe they're little orphan fold hinges. Maybe it's not quite as big as Bindi. Don't know. Haven't done the work to really work that up. But there is something happening down there. The whole of that 30-kilometre belt it shows significant mineralisation or hosts some of our existing ore bodies. Ninan, it's not new, sorry. Ninan and Wongan West, where we see strong gold and base metal anomalism buried beneath a deeper weathering profile. So the base, when I say base metal, I'm talking lead zinc. We don't have much of a lead zinc signature over the main project, but this prospect west of Ninan, there's this really, really strong lead, zinc, arsenic, antimony, everything, gold. And nothing's been done there for 15 years. So pretty excited. Just want the boss to give me some money to go and drill some holes there. And then to coin a phrase from Mike, the wrinkles in the blanket. As far as this high strain zone, are we missing something? It's generally dipping off towards the east towards the centre of the Wongan batholith. Are there folds within that don't quite daylight? And I'd look at things like something here. Are we seeing just the very bit of smoke on the top of it, perhaps? And then, where is it? Dasher East. There's also some quite significant, and that's 1.8 kilometres out, and there's some fairly significant intersections out there. Not enough to string together into a resource yet, not enough to get the boss excited to put a whole heap of holes in. But is it one of these folds that's not quite daylighting? So wrinkles in the blanket. And then potential for porphyry preservation elsewhere across the southwest Yilgarn. If there's one, could there be others? It would be the question. The resource growth. So there's been 4 resources published for the project dating back to 2016. So the first one, 1.4 million tonnes of contained metal. The latest one, 3 million tonnes of metal, which with greatly increased confidence in that resource, because we've got a much better understanding of what's happening with the structure and things as far as those overturned folds. So the current resource at a 0.1% copper cutoff is 1.2 billion tonnes at 0.24% copper, 47 parts per million moly. So that's 3 million tonnes of copper in the ground and approximately 895,000 ounces of gold. At a 0.25% cutoff, 494 million tonnes at 0.35% copper for 1.7 million tonnes of copper in the ground. And the reserve, the 2022 reserve at 0.1% cutoff, 583 million tonnes, 0.24% copper for 1.42 million tonnes of copper in the ground. Development, this is for the engineers. Open pit mining with the 1.3 to 1 stripping ratio, utilising bulk mining and autonomous operations, hopefully from the start. Processing 27 million tonnes per annum for 28 years. Does it grow? Maybe it does, but 28 years at the moment. 92% recovery with very few impurities. Perhaps it's a metamorphism, but we have very few impurities in this. It's a nice clean concentrate. Conventional crush, grind, flotation circuit, flow sheet. Sorry, there's nothing particularly magical that has to happen. Grind it fine enough, the chalcopyrite floats. Producing 60,000 tonnes per annum copper in concentrate, grading 25%. Annual average production of 14,000 ounces of gold, 660,000 ounces of silver that would go with the copper concentrate. Mineralization is amenable to ore sorting for future flow sheet modification. So we have done some test work on that. It is a big bulk, low-grade tonnage. Sorry, it is a big bulk, low-grade, large tonnage deposit. We have explored the options of upgrading that with some sort of ore sorting. It is amenable to that, but at the moment we just want to keep it simple and it's a straight up project as far as crushing, grinding and flotation. But it certainly would lend itself to ore sorting. Mine electrification, we are within spitting distance of the grid, and we can upgrade lines and put in our own substations, etc. And proximity to Perth, shipping ports, good roads and regional infrastructure. And then just a bit of a forward-looking statement. Please make your own informed decisions on any investments you might make in Caravel, but please do buy. And then just a farewell shot looking, so this is looking northeast across the project. This is Bindi, and Bindi West sits in this paddock here. Bindi Hinge sits up about there, and then the east limb. You can probably see the area there where we were doing a lot of RC drilling. They didn't crop it that year, but that's where the east limb runs. And then Lake Ninnon off in the distance. That's my talk.